So this is me reading the first Federalist paper a couple of days late. Go ahead and continue watching to go ahead and listen to me terribly read aloud the first Federalist paper, or you can click on this annotation which will take you directly to the analysis and discussion and history of the Federalist paper. Introduction. After an unequivocal experience of the inefficacy of the subsiding federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new constitution for the United States of America. The subject speaks its own importance, comprehending in its consequences nothing less than the existence of the Union, the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed, the fate of an empire in many respects the most interesting in the world. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country, by their conduct and example, to decide the important question, whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we are arrived may, with propriety, be regarded as the era in which that decision is to be made, and a wrong election of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as the general misfortune of mankind. This idea will add the inducements of philanthropy to those of patriotism, to heighten the solicitude which all considerate and good men must feel for the event. Happy will it be if our choice should be directed by a judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the public good. But this is a thing more ardently to be wished than seriously to be expected. The plan offered to our deliberations affects too many particular interests, innovates upon too many local institutions, not to involve in its discussion a variety of objects foreign to its merits, and of views, passions, and prejudices little favorable to the discovery of truth. Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new Constitution will have to encounter, may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state to resist all changes which may hazard a diminution of the power, annulment, and consequence of the offices they hold under the state establishments, and the perverted ambition of another class of men who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country, or will flatter themselves with fairer prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies than from its union under one government. It is not, however, my design to dwell upon observations of this nature. I am well aware that it would be disingenuous to resolve indiscriminately the opposition of any set of men, merely because their situations might subject them to suspicion, into interested or ambitious views. Candor will oblige us to admit that even such men may be actuated by upright intentions, and it cannot be doubted that much of the opposition which has made its appearance, or may hereafter make its appearance, will spring from sources, blameless at least if not respectable, the honest errors of minds led astray by preconceived jealousies and fears. So numerous indeed, and so powerful are the causes which serve to give a false bias to the judgment, that we, upon many occasions, see wise and good men on the wrong as well as on the right side of questions of the first magnitude to society. This circumstance, if duly attended to, would furnish a lesson of moderation to those who are ever so thoroughly persuaded of their being right in the right of any controversy. And a further reason for caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always sure that those who advocate the truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives not more laudable than these are apt to operate as well upon those who support as those who oppose the right side of a question. Were there not even these inducements to moderation, nothing could be more ill-judged than that intolerant spirit which has at all times characterized political parties. For in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. And yet, however, just these sentiments will be allowed to be. We have already sufficient indications that it will happen in this as in all former cases of great national discussion. A torrent of angry and malignant passions will be let loose. To judge from the conduct of the opposite parties, we shall be led to conclude that they will mutually hope to advise the justness of their opinions, and to increase the number of their converts by the loudness of their declamations and by the bitterness of their invectives. An enlightened zeal for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as the offspring of a temper fond of despotic power and hostile to the principles of liberty. An over-scrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of the people, which is more commonly the fault of the head than of the heart, will be represented as mere pretense and artifice, the stale bait for popularity at the expense of public good. It will be forgotten, on the one hand, that jealousy is the usual concomitant of violent love, and that the noble enthusiasm of liberty is too apt to be infected with the spirit of narrow and illiberal distrust. On the other hand, it will be equally forgotten that the vigor of the government is essential to the security of liberty, that, in the contemplation of a sound and well-informed judgment, their interests can never be separated, and that a dangerous ambition more often lurks behind the specious mask of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidding appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. History will teach us that the former has been found a much more certain road to the introduction of despotism than the latter, and that of those men who have overturned the liberties of republics, the greatest number have begun their career by paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants. In the course of the preceding observations, I have had an eye, my fellow citizens, to putting you upon your guard against all attempts, from whatever quarter, to influence your decision in a matter of the utmost moment to your welfare by any impressions other than those which may result from the evidence of truth. You will, no doubt, at the same time have collected from the general scope of them that they may proceed from a source not unfriendly to the new Constitution. Yes, my countrymen, I owe to you that after having given it an attentive consideration, I am clearly of opinion it is in your interest to adopt it. I am convinced that this is the safest course for your liberty, your dignity, and your happiness. I affect not reserves which I do not feel. I will not amuse you with an appearance of deliberation when I have decided. I frankly acknowledge to you my convictions, and I will freely lay before you the reasons on which they are founded. The consciousness of good intentions disdains ambiguity. I shall not, however, multiply professions on this head. My motives must remain in the depository of my own breast. My arguments will be open to all and may be judged of by all. They shall at least be offered in a spirit which will not disgrace the cause of truth. I propose, in a series of papers, to discuss the following interesting particulars: the utility of the Union to your political prosperity, the insufficiency of the present Confederation to preserve that Union, the necessity of a government at least equally energetic with the one proposed to the attainment of this object, the conformity of the proposed Constitution to the true principles of Republican government, its analogy to your own state constitution, and lastly, the additional security which its adoption will afford to the preservation of that species of government, to liberty and to its prosperity. In the progress of this discussion, I shall endeavor to give a satisfactory answer to all the objections which shall have made their appearance, that may seem to have any claim to your attention. It may perhaps be thought superfluous to offer arguments to prove the utility of the Union, a point no doubt deeply ingrained on the hearts of the great body of the people in every state, and one which, it may be imagined, has no adversaries. But the fact is, we already hear it whispered in the private circles of those who oppose the new Constitution, that the 13 states are of too great extent for any general system, and that we must of necessity resort to separate confederacies of distinct proportions on the whole. The same idea, tracing the arguments to the consequences, is held out in several of the late publications against the new Constitution. This doctrine will, in all probability, be gradually propagated till it has votaries enough to countenance an open avowal of it, for nothing can be more evident to those who are able to take an enlarged view of the subject than the alternative of an adoption of the new Constitution or dismemberment of the Union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that union, the certain evils and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed from its dissolution. This shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address, Publius. Alright, so the first Federalist paper is relatively easy to understand. It is the introduction to the Federalist papers, which go into much further detail as we go along, but as an introduction it's fairly, digestible. It's quite clear that the writer was like, okay, so y'alls are in charge of deciding whether or not you accept this Constitution we're presenting to you. It's better than the Articles of Confederation. I know you guys don't like the fact that it's very, singular government instead of a bunch of state governments. The next several essays are going to explain to you why we need a centralized government instead of the crack shit thing that we had before. So, two things that we should probably point out about this is basically going over the history of the Articles of Confederation. So, Basically, the Articles of Confederation were the government kind of structure thing that was in place immediately after the Declaration of Independence was written and sent off to Britain. Now, a bunch of people were like, we don't want something that unifies us all. I mean, come on, that's so boring, and like, you're gonna make us unify? Because we were just under a monarchy, and monarchy sucks, and so does order, and gross. Precursor to the Articles of Confederation, known as the Albany Plan, was rejected. But as the war went on, and as more and more people died, and as there was a greater need for funds to be accumulated, and stuff, and soldiers to be accumulated, the states were finally like, okay, fine, let's go ahead and organize. Ugh. So some people from New York were like, okay, here are the rules. Basically, don't start up your own form of government separate from the rest of us while we're all trying to work together to fight Britain. But there are some major flaws with the Articles of Confederation, namely, how were funds going to be allocated, what funds do we use, because the Articles of Confederation were like, hey, yeah, we're not going to restrict what kind of money you can print, and a major thing that I'm going to point out now was that, like, every single state had a different, like, money system like that. Like, imagine you have, like, our standard US system in, like, say, Maryland, and then it was trying to do stuff with Pennsylvania, which was under, like, the Harry Potter world money system. And then you had, like, New York under the system of, I don't know, the Star Wars credit system. So as you can imagine, it was a freaking mess. But for the purposes of just trying to keep together a bunch of different states in order to fight a war, it worked. When it came to actually governing, though, it didn't really work. But I'll elaborate on those through the rest of the Federalist YouTubes, because each specific one tackles a very specific part of the Articles of Confederation and why the Constitution is better than the alternative. So some more historical facts about the Articles of Confederation. Was put into effect on November 15th, 1777, was finally ratified completely by all 13 states in 1781, and was kind of pushed aside in 1789 when the Constitution was finally instated after the Federalist Papers were written and after people had voted on it and were like, yeah, okay, we're fine with this Constitution thing. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, who the hell is Publius? Publius was basically one of the key people involved in turning ancient Rome from a monarchy into a democracy of sorts. He was the right-hand man to this guy named Brutus, not Brutus from Julius Caesar, sorry Shakespeare fans. They basically together took out the king, kicked him out, and then there was like a war. In the process, Brutus died, because war is hell and people die. So Publius kind of had the main power position for a very long time, and this was like 510 BCE, before Common Era. About a year later, when Publius was the main guy in power, he was building this nice big house atop a nice hill overlooking the city, and someone called him out and was like, yo, Publius, you are building a really big house on top of that hill, and that seems like something a monarch would do. Boo, the monarchy, boo, boo! And Publius, being the cool guy that he was like, ah, crap, that does make me look like a bad dude. I'm gonna tear down that house that I'm building right up on that hill, right over there, and I'm going to build one right next to my people. So Publius was a somewhat decent dude. I mean, being called out on something and then literally the next day demolishing the thing that he was being called out on for? Nice! So Publius also did some reforming of the laws while he was in office during 509 BCE. And he was basically like, any Roman can be appointed to council. I mean, any of y'all can be part of the government. Also, if the council makes a stupid-ass decision, you can vote against, you can, like, say, no, screw you. Anyone who seizes office without being voted in will get beheaded. Anyone who tries to reestablish the monarchy can get stabbed. So, I mean, a lot of those sound like pretty good American ideals that I hear supported all the time. Meanwhile, others are politely ignored and seen as undemocratic. Needy Romans are exempt from taxation. Patricians will be punished more severely for breaking a rule. The treasury isn't going to be right in the pockets of your governing people. The money is going to live in a separate building on the opposite side of town with people that actually know how money works. But whatever. So basically Publius was kind of seen as a hero figure, especially in terms of setting up a democracy. And a lot of what he said and did during his time as a member of the council was like, you know, anti-monarchy. And the monarchy was kind of not something that you wanted to be associated with, especially post-American Revolutionary War. Sorry about my phone charger is a doof. Hamilton, Madison, and Jay were like, oh, hey, let's use this guy named Publius. A lot of his thinking is really cool, and we should look up to that. So that is why the papers are published under the anonymous name Publius. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, why was it published anonymously? Like, wouldn't people have known that the Constitution was being, like, so obviously supported by, like, Hamilton and crew? Actually, not really. You see, a lot of words for and against the Constitution were published at around the time that the Constitution was being voted on by the people. And who better to explain why the Constitution is a good idea than the people who helped develop and write it? Except there's obviously a bias there. I mean, the people who write specific laws and stuff like that, if you listen to them go, oh, hey, yeah, we're gonna write this law for you guys and we're gonna tell you why it's good, there's obvious bias there. If you publish it anonymously, there's at least some sort of semblance of, this person sounds like they know what they're talking about. I don't know whether or not this person helped write the Constitution, but they bring up some valid points. I'm gonna trust them more than that Alexander Hamilton dude who's definitely got Washington in his pocket. And so that's some history and some interesting facts regarding Federalist Paper 1 and its anonymous name and the history of the Articles of Confederation. Apologies, guys. A lot of stuff happened last week that essentially delayed me filming this video until the following Monday after the day that this was supposed to be published. Oops. Next episode, basically the second Federalist paper. That should follow up pretty quickly after this one because I have a lot of time on my hands and I'm going to go ahead and record that one tomorrow. So, ciao! Oh my gosh. Now I'm going to have High School Musical in my history of things I've listened to on Spotify. Major regrets.